our spring assessments to see who's qualifying. And we are now serving 174 students, 1st through 5th grade. So it's a pretty large number, and we kind of break it up. We have black and gold teams, and I'll kind of tell you a little bit how we share it. I know Gifted is done differently in every school that you go to, every system you go to, and you'll see quite a few differences even in the states that you'll get kids who qualify in one state that might not qualify in our state, or they qualify here and they don't qualify in another state. So what I'm going to share with you today is how we qualify in the state of Georgia, and then I'm also going to kind of share with you a little bit how we do at Calhoun and how we are able to serve so many too. So this is just, if you'll pass one kind of around, this is the eligibility flow chart, and it's in our handbook that we also keep online, and most systems probably have a handbook online. Have y'all seen this flow chart before? Y'all seen something like this? So basically we just start with our automatic referrals or reported referrals. And automatic referral is basically we're looking at some of those old test scores, or maybe some scores from some in-house testing that you might do. We use MAP. Anybody else use MAP scores to help qualify students? MAP, M-A-P. There's also ITBS. Does anybody still give the ITBS in any of your systems? Okay, we used to use that as a good qualifying score too. We have kids scoring in the 90th percentile. We put them on our radar and we're like, hey, wait a minute, this kid's scoring kind of high here. Maybe we should look at some other reports. We also have a reported referral. Teachers, counselors, even older kids can refer themselves to be tested. Of course, we get a lot of parent referrals, and all parents think their kids are gifted, and they many times are in complete shock when they see some of their scores. We're going to look at a few of these. Are some kids that I just tested. We have a few parent referrals, a few teacher referrals, some who qualified, some who didn't. I blacked out their names, so just for confidentiality purposes. But anyway, we'll kind of talk about some of those parent referrals too, and how we have to tenderly work with some of those parents. Step 2, we just search. We have our eligibility team. We'll come together. It's not just a one-person show at our school. We actually have a team of teachers. There's 3 of us. We have 2 part-time, myself, and then we have our gifted coordinator who works at the system level. She comes in. We look at these kids. We also say, oh, I've tested this one before. He was tested last year or the year before. Or, we just kind of discuss each of the kids that have been referred, either by the automatic referral or the reported referral. And then we make decisions. Yes, this kid is up for some additional testing, or this kid is not. Now, we did run into some problems this year because so many teachers think the minute that in our system, and it may be different for everybody else, but in our system, they just assume, oh, I referred this kid, he's going to be tested. But when the eligibility team met, we decided and looked at a few things like, oh, they're not eligible for testing because of X, Y, and Z. So when we sent forms to parents requesting the permission to do some further testing, we had some teachers that are like, wait, I didn't get a letter for this kid. And we're like, well, they're not eligible because of X, Y, and Z. So it is good to have a good team. A lot more eyes on things can kind of help out with some things too. And then we go into some assessments. Now, the state of Georgia has quite a few different assessments that they will deem that you can use for testing. In our school, we use just a few. We have 4 areas of eligibility. Have you talked about the 4 areas that they can? Okay. So you have the mental ability, achievement, creativity, and motivation. Okay. So mental ability, what we use is COGAT, and I think that's what most people use. And the great thing about COGAT is that there's 4 different areas. So you have, they could qualify with the verbal, which is basically like some deep vocabulary, quantitative math, nonverbal, some really cool puzzles, some that really kind of blow my mind when I'm looking at them. And then they could also have a composite score with that. So basically it's giving a kid 4 areas. They're like, ooh, maybe they'll qualify with this area, and then they can meet some other areas they can qualify as well. There's also something called the Otis Lennon that we give, but that's a one-time shot. That is a 1 test, a 1 score, you either yay or nay. But when you look at COGAT, you're like, ooh, maybe they'll qualify with verbal, but maybe they really bombed quantitative or something. But sometimes those COGAT scores could also raise some eyebrows. If you have somebody scoring really, really high in verbal and really, really low in quantitative, then you might want to look at some things like, oh, maybe this kid could potentially be even LD, you know, and having some major math difficulties, or vice versa. So anyway, I've got several of these tests y'all just kind of want to look at. Have y'all looked at eligibility reports before?
They have an assignment where they have 4 online that they have to look through, but that's about it.
Oh, okay, great. Well, I brought several, and these are students A through G, and we'll just kind of go through them. Now, I will tell you that we're a little OCD at our school as far as the way eligibility reports look. So we type everything, we have little check marks, and we really probably put forth a lot of extra effort than some systems because we get them. Some of them are hand scribbled, it's cursive writing, I can't even read. I'm like, does this kid really qualify or not? So anyway, let me just kind of share these. Did I give you 2 packets? Oh, I did give you more. Okay. So I don't know. Let's see, my hands are so dry, I can't pass these things out. Everybody have a little packet?
So, question.
Yes.
So there's 4 areas.
No, there's one area there. There's 4 areas to qualify.
So there's 4 tests or whatever. They only have to score about 90% on 96% on one.
No, hold on. So, okay, the state of Georgia says there's 4 areas that a student could qualify. Now, if they're qualifying on multi-criteria, they have to qualify in 3 of the 4 areas. Mental ability is just one area, so they would have to meet a qualifying score just in mental ability to get that one score.
But they're like 4 tests or something.
Well, if you look at mental ability, where this first one, let's look at our student A. This is student A for awesome, he did good. Yeah, so if you're looking at Kodak, you can see his verbal score was a 73, quantitative 83, nonverbal 67, and a composite, which is kind of like an average, but it's a weighted average based on how they do each of those areas, 79. Now, if you nonverbal is like a lot of really cool puzzles. So it's like, no, it's more like visual puzzles, some paper folding, like they show some things like, it'll show a piece of paper, it'll say, this is your paper. And it'll show the next picture and it'll say, this is where your paper's gonna be folded. And then it'll show the next paper as it's folded and it'll say, it's punched here and here. What will it look like when you open it? Some can be, yeah. And then some of the other ones are like looking at, if you're looking at following a sequence of patterns, like if this pattern is changing like this, what will the next pattern be? Some of them, I'm not kidding y'all, I look at them and I'm like, dang, I do not know. So I struggle with some of them, but you know, people are always like, oh, Angie Gravitt's gifted. I'm like, no, I just teach gifted. There's a very big difference here. I'm just loud and animated, that's all. But anyway, if you look at this mental ability, you'll see over on the side where it says criteria. And if you'll see the little asterisk, you see the bottom where it says K2 99th percentile. Okay, if a student in kindergarten, first or second, scores a 99th percentile just in that composite area, they only, according to the state of Georgia, they only have to have one more qualifying score in one of the other three areas. So basically they only have to have 2 scores. So if they score 99 in that composite, they really only need one more. So, you know, maybe that motivation was way low, maybe their creativity was way low, but maybe in their achievement on map reading, they got like a 90. They would only have to have that 90 and then the 99th composite. Does that make sense? Okay. So
is that only for the 99 for K2? That doesn't apply to
right.
96 for 3 through 12?
Right. For 3 through 12, they would have to have a 96 composite and one more of those qualifying scores.
And it would be free still.
It's like the old rule.
No.
And we talked about the old rule and the new rule.
Right. They would not have to have 3 total. They would, if they get that composite score of a 99, a 96, or a 99, depending on their grade. Right.
Correct. No component, it has to be the composite.
Right, it has to be that composite score. And I think that freaks people out too, because they're like, oh wait, look, they got a 99 in quantitative. And I'm like, yeah, but their nonverbal might have been a 42, and then their composite might be a 87 or something like that. So
So just clarifying, so if this child had a
We're gonna look at one like that.
composite, and they only met in like achievement, that's it, achievement and mental, they didn't meet in creative motivation, but they had a 99 on that composite and they met for mental achievement, they beat in.
It'd be in under what they call psychometric.
Okay.
I've got one for you to see like that. I've got one for you to see. Okay, so here's our little student A, and you can see over on the side, he has no qualifying scores because he didn't meet any of the 96 or higher percentile in any of those areas or a composite score. And if you look at achievement, this little fella's struggling with the reading and math, 71, 79. And this was a teacher referral, so maybe this kid's really doing something in the classroom that's a bang-up job, or maybe he's just a standout because maybe the rest of the class is fairly low. I mean, who knows what the story may be. And then we have the creativity and motivation are fairly low. And we like to try to put the less than or greater than just to kind of ease the blow to some of the parents, because sometimes those scores are fairly low, and I'll show you a couple of those as well. Yeah,
About motivation.
sure.
In middle school, it's a lot of teacher surveys.
Yeah, we got that.
and It feels very subjective.
Well, and the great thing is, if you'll notice with motivation, it has GPA. So let's say they have a 4.0, and we see that with gifted kids all the time. I have teachers telling me all the time, they're like, well, he's so smart, but gosh, he doesn't do anything in the classroom. I'm like, well, because he's not sparked or he's not
What about,
motivated to do
elementary where
anything.
grades, so like my child doesn't get grades, she gets like 3s and 4s and 5s.
Oh, so it's a standards-based.
Yes.
See, that's
Like
where we run in.
40 of them that come, like, I don't know what that junk means, but I'm not seeing A's and B's, I just see numbers.
Right,
So
we've
how
run
do
into
they-
that a lot with us, and we're having to reevaluate some of our handbook about that, because we do have a lot of people doing the standard-based report card. So we're still in the works with that as well, so
I'm like,
you're not alone.
Motivation, I don't know where they're calling the line. Motivation.
Well, and I will tell you what we've done with motivation, okay, because I don't know if I've got this little fella in here, but we did have a little fella who, the only thing that was keeping him out was a low motivation score. He had a mental ability, he had achievement. We gave him the Torrance for creativity and didn't do so hot there. He just needed that motivation score. So he had I think an 86. And we were like, oh, that's just a couple numbers off. So we're like, when we see something in this, but maybe the teacher's just kind of with them, you know what I mean? Like got a little bit of an attitude with this kid because maybe he's not doing what she's wanting him to do in the classroom. We've gone to other teachers and we're like, can you fill out a motivation scale on this kid? Sure. And then we average the two, and if those two meet the qualifying score, then we're like, this kid's in. So that's how we kind of go around that. So it's not like we're trumping another teacher. We're just kind of getting a broader perspective.
It's just kind of like, well.
Yeah.
That's what we used to get. We used to give 3 when Beth Holcomb and I talked together. We would give 3 checklists to 3 different teachers, and then we would average. But then it also, what that did, that like you said, a lot of times you might have this, and then you would have somebody really high or really low, and it kind of made you go,
Right.
And it may be that teacher just scored everyone that way, or maybe there was something hinky going on in that room, but we would give 3 an average, and anytime we did any kind of checklist, that was just kind of our rule of thumb, because they can be very subjective.
Really skewed motivation scores and give kids, like I teach science in so much space. I have totally different children in my room than the other 3 members of my team have.
Mhm.
Because I've got somebody, and they love what we do, but they don't want to do it, because they don't think we're working in my room sometimes. It's not work. The other classes would have to write or do that, that's work.
Yeah.
So I get, we'll be sitting at lunch talking about children, and I'll be like, hey, are you serious? So-and-so acts like that? Because I don't see that. So I can see where it might not even be something hinky, it might just be
Subject matter.
love for one subject.
Yeah.
Yep, you're right.
And we see
You're right.
that a lot. Like I'll have teachers all the time come to me going, this kid is, terrible in my classroom. I'm like, are you kidding me? I never have trouble with them in resource. Now, the way we serve is we do 1 full day. So like I'll have 5th grade all day. Like I had 4th grade all day today. Tomorrow I go to 1st grade. Like I have to have an extra cup of coffee before 1st grade, but because I was never a 1st grade teacher, but resource is a little bit different. But then the next day I do 5th, and the next day I do 3rd. So we break it up that way, and we serve them for a full day. 'Cause we did try the 50-minute segment where they come for 50 minutes every day. Oh my gosh, that stop-start drove me insane. I could not get into a unit. We could not get into anything major, a creativity project, you might as well forget it. So we switched this. The teachers seem to really like it because when those chiefs are gone out of their classroom, they're able to do some remediation with some of those others. And some of those other kids in the class that are left in the classroom, when those resource kids are, they'll start to shine. They'll start to answer questions. They'll start to do some things. So anyway, all right, back to our little thing. So here we see our little fella A. He will have no special, she, I don't even know who it is really. No special services at this time, according to the multi-criteria. Now, the thing about the creativity and the motivation, we give one checklist. It's a GRS checklist, and it has a whole bunch of areas to check, and we just tell teachers, just look at creativity, just look at motivation, give us what you think. So we will take the creativity checklist, and we've got it here, and we take the motivation checklist, and we put it here. But really, we can't use both of those checklists to qualify a student. So like they can't get the 90th percentile in a checklist for creativity and a checklist for motivation to qualify with say an achievement score. Does that make sense? So then that's what we do. So then if we have a kid who scored mental ability, and let's say they have an achievement, and so they need one more, and maybe motivation was like way low, we're like, okay, maybe it's just a fluke. Let's give them the Torrance. And so we'll do a Torrance, and then that way we can say the Torrance was their score. Yes?
I just like that better.
Yeah. Well, I do. If you have never seen the Torrance or seen what kids can produce with the Torrance, it will blow your mind what some of these kids come up with. But I will tell you that, well, yeah, a little bit. Yeah, there's kind of like some squiggles. But I had to go to a Torrance training in order to become certified to actually grade it. It's kind of a grueling thing, but I encourage anybody to go. It's offered in Athens. It's great. The Torrance Center there in Athens. You'll learn all about how the history of the test came about. But anyway, so it's really kind of a cool thing to do. But it did take some training for me to, and then you have to pass all these tests. But even then, it's a little subjective. But we like to err on the side of the kid as much as we can. I'm sorry?
It takes a lot of eyes to grade them. I've had to grade them with our kids over. I don't know.
Right. Well, there's so many different areas that you're looking at there. So yeah. All right. Any questions about our little student A? All right. So let's flip over and look at student B. This is a parent referral, and you can see some of these COGAT scores up at the top. Yeah. And even look at the achievement scores. And then we went and looked at creativity and motivation, but this parent swears her child's gifted. So then I get the phone call, because when we send these home, we send a letter home that says, if you would like a conference to discuss your child's scores, just call. So I get the phone call, I'd like to discuss my child's scores. I'm like, okay. And some parents are very receptive to that. Some parents aren't, but numbers don't lie. This is kind of how we do it, but I explain to them what we're doing. But a lot of times, parents will ask me, well, where can I go to get my kid tutored for this little COGAT thing? And I'm like, well, it's like an IQ test. So they do have some examples online.
So I saw with being tested for gifted, and I went online, and you can, like, there are so many things that they can do. You can buy. I had to get one.
Right. So they want me to tutor them. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work out for you. But does everybody understand why this kid is a non-qualifying score? Okay. So little B going on. All right, let's look at C. This is a little first grader. And I want you to check out this composite score and that quantitative score. Now, the thing about quantitative, it's the math stuff, but it is problem-solving math. It's not giving them a whole bunch of like 2 + 3, 5 + 7. It is like looking at things and figuring out a missing picture that's going to make something equal. It really takes some time to really get these kids focused. And that's where we do see some problems with some of our kids that don't qualify. A lot of times it's an attention thing. If you've got a kid that's obviously suffering with some ADHD, or they have some other behavior problems, they have a hard time focusing on this test, because the great thing about our system is we have purchased the rights to do COGAT online. Long gone are the days where I had to hand score, hand norm. It made my eyes cross. The norm numbers are like a size 3 font, right?
Yes, and you have to flip back and
I'm
forth
like, oh
in the
my
book
gosh,
between
it
about
took
10 different pages.
The week of testing, I used to give the test, and I would stay at school till sometimes 8, 9 o'clock at night, scoring and norming tests just so I'd have them ready. It was a nightmare. Now, we just submit them, boom, the next day my scores are there. I'm like, just put that in there in a little spreadsheet, and off we go. But look at this guy. He's obviously got some good math skills here for this quantitative and COGAT, but it didn't really show up in the achievement with that MAP score. Generally what we see is we'll see some correlating scores. Like if somebody scores really high in quantitative and COGAT, most of the time we'll see a high math score on ITBS or MAP. It just kind of makes sense, right? But this little fella didn't. I'm not sure what happened. But anyway, so composite score there, it wouldn't matter if he didn't have that 90, 98, 99. He's qualified everywhere. Can you see that?
So let me ask you this.
Yes.
Okay, putting the composite score aside, just looking at the verbal, the nonverbal, and the quantitative.
Right.
Just because if he had bombed everything else, but he had over a 96, well, he's a what grade? First grade. So you have to have a 99, right?
Right.
Not on composite, but just in general. Like you have to have, if he just had a 99 or even a 96 on one of those,
Right.
he would still qualify for that area.
Because he's 96.
Okay.
Yes.
As long as one of those is over 96.
Right,
Now,
right.
does it have to be 96 or higher or over 96?
96 or higher.
Okay. And not all of them, just one. Not even in composite. Just
Right.
one.
Just
little
one area.
Cool.
Right.
Makes
So
sense.
mine, I kind of highlight. I look at scores like this, and I'm like, oh yeah, this looks good, and I like highlight some things. But really, when we get these scores and we put these sheets together before we ever send them to parents, we've got 2 eyes minimum on everything, because you don't want to send a qualifying thing home that says your kid qualified when really they didn't, because then you're in a heap of mess trying to re-explain this to a parent. So we really try to put more eyes on this as possible. This one, you can see where we have the creativity, the rating scale, and the rating scale for motivation. We went ahead and marked yes, yes on that, even though we can't really count both of those, because this one did qualify in 3 areas, but we just marked it yes, yes. Does that make sense? We're really only counting like the creativity score achievement in one of the COGAT scores to match. So our little fella in C, a new first grader for me, that puts me at 23 in first grade. Resource. I'm not kidding, y'all. It's like stepping on an anthill when they come in my room. They're like everywhere. And then we did something with them. I thought, oh, I'm gonna do makey makey with my first graders. Oh my gosh, do y'all know what makey makey is? Well, look it up. It was developed by these guys at MIT. Some MIT college students developed this thing where you have this little computer, we call it the motherboard, and you have all these alligator clips, and you can attach the alligator clips to the motherboard and one clip to your Chromebook, and then the other end of the alligator clip you can put on inanimate objects, and kids can do things. Like they can touch bananas and play bongos, or they can hook it up to Play-Doh and they can play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, or it's really cool. Makey Makey's a lot of fun. It's $50 a kit. Anyway, look it up. It's a lot of fun to mess around with. All right, let's look at D. This is a second grader. Look at these scores. And this was a parent referral. These scores blew my mind. But if you look down at motivation, this is what the teacher thought about this kid. Motivation, yeah. Look at the creativity was down below. Now, I also served this child's sister. And if you are familiar, I don't know the age of most of y'all, some of y'all look way younger than I am, but Punky Brewster, do you remember the days? Yeah, this is this kid and this family. They are a hot mess from head to toe, but I mean, as gifted as the day is long. When you look at these scores, I'm like 99, 98, 96, and a 99 composite, and that second grader, I watched him take this test, and he was like turning his hand like this, trying to figure out how things work on the computer. I was just like, woo! So those scores blew my mind. Very impressive. So it wouldn't have mattered what the teacher thought, this kid's issue with, right here. Psychometric approach. Any questions about this guy?
This is your example of only needing 2.
I'm sorry?
This is your example of only needing 2.
Right, this is my example of only needing 2. He got that composite, 99, and then he's got a math score for achievement. And then it doesn't matter what the other ones say.
Okay.
Yes?
But that works for older kids too, right? You can do the psychometric.
Yes,
approach
but the
for
older ones, they have to have 96 or higher for that composite. So if you look at that little spreadsheet, it'll say it right there with that little asterisk. You have one? Yeah, okay. Any questions about D? All right, look at our little fella in E. All right. So verbal 81, quantitative 52, nonverbal 50, composite 69. There's not one qualifying score there. Reading, it's got a 93. Rating scales are very low. So we're just thinking, now this one was an automatic referral. if you look at the top, it wasn't a parent referral, wasn't a teacher referral, it was one that showed up on our radar with MAP. And I can't explain it. Maybe the kid was a good guesser that day. I really don't know. But sometimes when we get these, and we tell the teacher, hey, we're going to do some further testing, the teachers will look at us like, really? Do you know what he doesn't do in my classroom? And I'm like, well, we're just going to go on our. I would rather test more kids and not have them than to miss those kids.
Yeah.
Because we started using MAP as our child find a couple years ago, and we found a 5th grader who qualified psychometric, and she had gone through our system, but she was that quiet kid in the back. She was that teacher pleaser. She did her assignments. She was neat and organized with everything, but nobody ever really thought this kid was gifted. Well, when she qualified, she was in heaven in gifted resource. Took our units and flew with them, did above and beyond research, had awesome presentations, amazing kids. So I'm glad that we have that child find so that we can either, you know, hey, yay, let's get these kids where they need to go or not. So, all right, let's look at our child F. Here's another one of our automatic referrals. I think that motivation scale, that was kind of low. Any questions about this one? There's nothing even close up there. Now, sometimes what we do is we'll look at COGAT and we think, okay, so they've got some scores in the 80s. Like maybe they have a verbal of like 86 and maybe a quantitative of 82. You know, like they're in the 80s or whatever, and maybe their achievement's kind of high, but yet they don't have anything else that's qualifying. Sometimes we'll look at that and say, okay, maybe they're just not good with that COGAT thing. Let's give them Otis Lennon. And so we'll give him that Otis Lennon one-time shot. And we did have a kid qualify that way. He scored like, I think he had some actually low 90s, like 92, 93. We gave him that Otis Lennon, 96. We're like, what? But it was paper pencil. It wasn't on the computer. So once again, maybe that was probably a reason why this kid didn't initially qualify. So we were thrilled. And he's like a ping pong ball, like no lie. He's like, Ms. Crowder, when do I get to I can't wait to go. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Chill, we're gonna work on that, isn't it? All right, let's look at kid G. So check this one out. Can you see how this one qualified? Look at that verbal score. This is a 5th grader. And you know, I also have a lot of teachers that are real hesitant to refer 5th graders, especially for the spring testing, because they're like, well, they're only going to get like 1 semester of gifted anyway. And I'm like, whoa, time out. Well, hold on. They're going to get 1 semester, plus they're going to get middle school stuff. You know, then they're going to have that shoe in to make sure they're getting into those honors and high level classes that they need to be in. So don't ever feel like time-wise, like, you're not wasting anybody's time. I mean, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to find these kids, whether it is the spring of their 5th grade year or the very end of their 5th grade year. If I need to find a kid that needs those gifted services, I'm going to make sure they get that. All right. Any questions about our kid G?
They qualify in all 4 areas, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're
Very well-rounded kid, yeah. I wish I could see through my black marks to see who that is. I can tell you a little bit more about him. I blacked mine out too. Are there any questions about our little people, A through G, or about how we do? Now, we'll tell you this. The state of Georgia says that any of the scores that they receive are valid for 2 years. But the way Calhoun City Schools, we don't, it used to be Calhoun would only test every 2 years. Like, oh, well, you tested in first. We're not going to test you again until, the end of 3rd. And I'm like, what if they just had a bad testing day? Or, maybe they just weren't really mature enough to take that test. Or maybe they were just so unfamiliar with the whole testing setting that they freaked out and froze. Why are we doing that to our kids? So the great thing is we now test every year. We make them wait 1 full academic year. But let's say they have a qualifying score in MAP. They have a gifted rating scale. And that's it. So they've got 2 areas. So we're just looking for 1 more area. So we just give them the COGAP. We don't have to put them through the whole battery of tests again if we don't need to. We used to have to give MAP or the ITBS, but now that we have MAP as a child find, we don't have to do that. But like maybe they qualified in 1 area of COGAT, but didn't qualify in MAP or maybe creativity, but they got a motivation. So there's 2. So we have a COGAT and motivation. But then the next year, they got that MAP score in. We're like, whoa, wait a second. We've got this kid qualified now. You know, he's got that score, as long as it's within that 2 years. Now, we're not gonna take first grade scores and go, oh, well, in first grade, now that he's a 5th grader, you remember back in first grade we did this? We're gonna take it for 2 years. So if it's past the 2-year mark, then we do have to give the whole battery of tests again. Does that make sense? Not every system does that. And a lot of it is money, because it is costly to give some, especially if you're doing those paper pencil tests, like when we were having to do those COGAT tests. Y'all, has anybody seen the COGAT test? The book, I'm not kidding, is that thick. And the younger kids. Now the older ones will do the Scantron on, and that's another thing that messes some of them up. They get off on that Scantron, screws their whole test up, and you're like, why would you want that kid not to qualify just because they got off on one area? You know, they may really be there. So my job is to make sure that kids get those gifted services if they need those gifted services. We push for kids to get those gifted services. We definitely want to meet kids where they need to be. So I'm so glad you filmed me. See?
I filmed you. Yes, you
I
look
feel like
lovely.
I told my husband this morning, I look like I'm wearing a picnic blanket. Great picnic blanket. Are there any questions? Y'all good?
Here's your chance to ask any and all questions about your students, or I know a lot of times we get questions about people's personal kids too, and that's totally fine as well.
I get that a lot. You know, parents are so, I get it. When parents see their children, they see them in a whole different light than we do. And I like to be able to tell parents, I'm like, hey, I have 2 kids of my own. One's a junior at the University of Georgia. I know I don't look old enough to have a kid that old, do I? Tell you.
Not at all.
And my son is a freshman at Kennesaw. So neither one of my kids received gifted services. They were both great students. They just weren't those out-of-the-box thinkers. But I was very confident that the teachers that they had provided that differentiation that they needed. They were able to get some other enrichment activities in other various areas of their academic career. So I didn't worry about them. And now my daughter's about to graduate a semester early from UGA. My son, we'll worry about, you know, he's a musical theater major, so we don't know where that's going to take us, but we'll see.
He's extremely talented.
Oh, well, you're sweet, but he definitely beats to his own drum, and we're just going to let him for a little while. But anyway, so I like to be able to tell parents, well, you know, my kids weren't in the gifted program either, but you are in an awesome school system that has awesome teachers that are going to make sure your kid's getting the enrichment they need. So
When y'all start testing in Calhoun, did you start in kindergarten or first?
we started end of kindergarten, and I promise you, I do not look forward to that day.
Yeah, I don't
Because
get that.
testing kindergarten, y'all, like, I don't know if there's enough caffeine to help me get through. Like, it is tough, and we really have to break it up into small segments. But because they're like, I'm gonna choose on time, I'm gonna blow my nose, and they're snotting everywhere. I'm like, oh my God, don't blow your nose on the computer.
Not maybe
It's just like,
kindergarten either, I totally get it.
But we only test kindergarten in the spring
Okay.
because in May, I don't know if anybody else is as crazy as we are in May, but between field days and field trips and honors days and this day and oh my gosh, we could not work around all that. So we just decided we're only gonna do kindergarten in the spring. And then we take our spring MAP scores and we hold on to those, and we have those kids targeted for the fall. And it used to be really hard because the way we like to do is our kids are getting, now we're talking about funding. So kids get we get funded for gifted students, and that's how my salary gets paid and the others. But they get funding for resource, but they also get funding for the students for staying in a gifted certified homeroom teacher.
Collaborative model.
Right.
Okay. Or a
So
lecture, I guess.
we really like to, try to double dip as much as we can. So we put those already qualified gifted students in a gifted homeroom teacher, plus they're getting the resource with me. So it really becomes sticky when in the fall, if they're already placed in homerooms and we have them qualify and they're in a homeroom where they're not with a gifted certified teacher. So we have been very creative with that, and we send them we have Hive groups. They have some flex with reading and math. They flex with that. So we tried real hard to partner up teachers, like a gifted certified and a non-gifted certified, or sometimes the way our teams work, we can move kids around. Okay, well for Hive, we call it, what does Hive even stand for? I don't even know. It's just like
It's an enrichment
it's
and
like
intervention block.
yeah, it's just our intervention type thing. So they can go to a Hive teacher and get that segment as well. So we've been real creative with how we can handle that. The great thing is we continue to put push out this gifted endorsement. One, because we know Michelle's awesome with the way she teaches it, but you guys are getting a lot up too. But we usually have a lot more accounting people. I'm not sure. I think a lot of us are doing math endorsements and reading endorsements this time. I signed up to do a reading endorsement. I don't know. I'm like 5 years from retirement. I don't really know why I did that, but just something else for me to say, hey, I can do this now. So, lifelong learner, I guess. What?
Have these rules changed like within the last 10 years or anything?
Rules for what? How a child?
How they qualify. My oldest is 16 and he's in gifted, but they did not, okay, they took him to the gifted classes but didn't test him until he was in second grade because we changed schools. His first school refused to test him until he was in third grade. Said that it is almost impossible for a kid in kindergarten, first or second to qualify. So
That was in the state of Georgia?
I know that was in this county.
I'll be honest, I have, in the past years, I have seen that a lot. And if you remember, we've mentioned that in here about how difficult it is with kindergarten, but law in Georgia says kindergarten.
Well, my younger two got
so-
tested in kindergarten and they were fine, but my oldest one, they refused to do it. I was like, okay. I mean.
Well,
you
I
got
will
third
tell you
grade.
that we're getting better. I will never forget the first year we used MAP as a score, or as a qualifier. We looked at kindergarten, and I'm not kidding. There were like 72 kindergartners that could have qualified for automatic referral for additional testing, and I was like, whoa, time out. There's no way this is happening. Well, come to find out, the way the MAP was administered was not up to the standardization that it needed to be. So they had to throw out that entire spring MAP score. The kindergarten teachers had to re-give MAP. They were thrilled with me. But then we got a more truer picture of those kindergarten kids, and it brought us down to about 22, which makes more sense. And out of that 22, we had quite a few. I had like 16 qualify. But a lot of it is the testing environment. Like when they come into me, we're stretching, we're doing something. I'm sure I'm like, okay, this is kind of what you're going to see today. This is what it looks like. So we'll take those stretch breaks. So a lot of it does depend on a testing environment. Would you agree? That sometimes if they come in, they're.
And I have had parents before in kindergarten that just ask me, do you think it's best we test our kid now? Especially back in the day when we only did every 2 years. And if they asked my opinion and I said, well, I can't tell you what to do, but if it were Hannah, I'd probably wait till first grade. I have had some that waited for that year of growth and maturity. But with, like you said, doing the clusters and the collaboratives and that kind of thing, we could still have kids served. And I trusted to have them in teachers' rooms where I knew they would be well taken care of. But I have had some parents ask my opinion, and I would just say, because testing kindergarten is hard. It is hard.
And I will tell you another kickback with that. When we have kids qualify end of kindergarten or first grade, sometimes by the time they're fifth grade, they're really struggling academically in some other areas. Like maybe they're really struggling in math. And that's when, as a team, we pull the teacher in, the gifted teachers in there, we pull the parent in, and we're like, look, let's look at some ways we can fix this. We don't want to totally kick them out of gifted because, obviously there's something still there a little bit. But what we'll do is say, okay, maybe during your math block, because we have them for a full day, so maybe during that 50-minute math block, you just keep them in there and then send them to gifted afterwards. And sometimes that works out. We've had some parents who say, look, they're struggling everywhere. We're just going to pull them out of the gifted program. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of sad, but okay. But and that doesn't happen very often. I think in the 5 years I've been doing it, we've only had 2 pull out. So.
And they can, as long as they're not out of calendar year, they can come out, because I know we did that with my child in middle school, pulled her out for second semester. And then she went right back in the next year and did fine. But if they're out of full calendar year, then they have to requalify. So I've had that happen a lot with middle school adjustments. But you typically you'll see a dip in third grade, and you'll see another big dip in the transfer from elementary to middle.
Yeah,
that's pretty standard with a lot of kids. So.
But my favorite way is when, I love teachers that say, oh my gosh, they're struggling with this and this. I'm like, but holy cow, this kid is so creative. Have you seen what this kid can draw? Have you seen what this kid can make out of 3D modeling clay? Have you seen what this child can produce in a little skit? Like, so we've got to remember too, I think almost every child's gifted somewhere, some way. In the perfect world, we would have all those kids that qualified gifted verbally, let's go over here. This is where your enrichment's gonna be. If you qualified in quantitative, you're gonna come over here and do all this. In a perfect world, we would do that. So we try to balance it. So we do a lot of different things in our gifted program. We do some things with creativity. We do a lot of things with math. We're working on hands-on equations. Some of those kids are loving it because it's like beginning algebra, but some of our kids would rather have forks gouged in their eyeballs than to have to do hands-on equations. So then we do research and the writing. The cool thing too is I actually have 3 kids that we're serving that are twice exceptional. They have an IEP because of some other issues, but yet they're in with me because they are off the chart with some of their creativity. And then I have one who I swear he is Rain Man. Y'all seen the movie, right? 437 toothpicks. I swear that's this kid. He can solve problems in his head like this, but cannot hold a pencil, cannot sit in a chair, cannot write a paragraph, but his math is unbelievable. So we really try to harvest that and not lose these kids. I guess you talked about the dropout rate for gifted kids is way higher than those who are struggling. So, and if you look at our prisons, they're full of gifted people because they have to creatively figure out how they're going to manslaughter all these people, and they have to creatively figure out how they're going.
Those leadership skills.
Am I not? Okay. And they have to creatively figure out how they're going to rob this place and get away with it and hide the evidence and all that kind of stuff. That takes some creativity. If we can harvest that and put it in a good way, then we've got a lot of those kids. So
Remember, we talked about that the very first class when we had to do the Post-it notes with gifted people, and we had Hitler and all kinds of people on there. We talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
Sad, but yeah.
I know. So we don't want to lose those gifted kids.
But another thing that has changed, like Angie said, with not being able to use the 2 checklists now, for a long time that was kind of best practice, but it wasn't spelled out in black and white. So some systems would use 2 checklists and some would not use 2. So and I don't know exactly when that came down firm black and white, but I'm glad it did.
And it is hard too. You know, of course, we have the rule or the law in Georgia says that if they're in your system and they qualify, it doesn't matter where they go in the state of Georgia, those scores are supposed to transfer. We have had some kids transfer from some other systems, and we look at those spreadsheets. What was that thing called? Eligibility report. We look at those and we're like, not quite sure how that happened, but okay, we'll take it. You know. So, and then we see that they struggle, and then the parents are like, well, you know, they didn't struggle at their other school, and I was like, well, I don't know if we're just hardcore at Calhoun or we just have this high level of expertise. I don't know what it is, but we get that sometimes too. Yes.
I think that in my classroom, I'm an EIP teacher, I only have 13 students, but I did submit one for gifted testing. And it's gonna be a stretch if he makes it, because he can't write, he can't hold a pencil, he doesn't know how to read. We're supposed to be on a level M, he's on a level B. He can't read at all. But his MAP score, we expect, I think it was like a 187, he's sitting at like a 212. So, his math is, I mean, he shouldn't even be in my classroom math, he's sitting to another teacher, because the things we're doing has no.
Does he have an IEP?
Yes.
Okay. What I did with the ones that had the IEPs, we had one-on-one testing with them.
Okay.
And testing accommodations, because it's a standardized test, should adhere right to gifted testing as well.
And he's also in speech and language, because they can't, he's hard to understand, do you think that's gonna keep him out of it?
Shouldn't. Absolutely not. We're about to test one in the spring that's visually impaired, and so we've got our IT department figuring out how are they going to make the things on the screen big enough for him to see, because he's basically blind and partial. You know who I'm talking about. But anyway, so they're trying to figure. I mean, he walks with a stick in our building, but he is so off the. And I guess he's compensated because he can't see everything, that he's been able to internalize a lot of his learning and thinking, and I don't know. But yeah, we're about to test him, but it'll be a one-on-one testing. So, but yeah, I would request that.
Yeah.
If you see something in those kids, I mean, you're an advocate for them, and you fight for what you see. I'm an advocate for all 174. It's a lot of them. Yes.
If they don't qualify, what, is there a time frame before they get tested again?
One full academic
It's
year.
just-
And we've had some kids, y'all, they get so close every time. Like, we'll wait one academic year and they're like, okay, well, we'll try it this year. And then the next year they're referred by a teacher, or their MAP scores come back high, and we're like, okay, is that for testing? And the parents are like, okay, one more year. Finally, we had one parent that said, I'm not putting my kid through this anymore. We're done. And then we've even done that as a team. Are we really gonna do this to this kid again? Because sometimes, and the older they get, they know what they're being tested for. so sometimes it could be a blow to some self-esteem, so we gotta be careful with some of that too.
That's what we were just talking about, because that's, my daughter went through that, and I finally got to a point where I was like, I don't want her being tested anymore. And Michelle, I know that you and I had talked about that as well. And she switched schools and ended up in Cobb County, and they did the testing, and lo and behold, she qualified. And she had like just qualified. And so it was a hard decision for me to make whether or not to put her in. And I talked to Christy Gallhofer, and Christy was like, well, but the advantage of putting her in is that then she will be pushed, and she needs to be pushed. And so it's only been a year now. She's in 8th grade, and she already, it's a much faster paced and much bigger workload for her, and things are not as easy, and so she's really struggling. And so that's what I was thinking about. You know, I know that probably sounds terrible as someone who's working on their gifted certification, but I mean, I was thinking, do I really want her to stay in the program?
Well, I feel like you have to take the whole child in.
You do.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not just academically,
Well,
but
and
emotionally.
And that's what Catherine and I were talking about as well, because, you know, she's got a summer birthday, so she's a full year younger
Yeah.
than all the others, and she is a little immature. And now my youngest son, super off the charts gifted. Like, and Janae, I feel, is very academically smart, but I don't know that she's a truly gifted child.
That was my daughter. My son, I think he is truly gifted in his own area. But my daughter was just, she was that, I'm going to study, and she made an A. She studied and made an A, but she wasn't like, sometimes we laugh at her and we're like, Hannah, you can't find your way out of a paper bag with 2 holes. Like, seriously, sometimes we do worry about that with her. But,
So if I
but she
can
is
ask-
academically smart.
If I can ask, and I'm sorry to take up everybody's time, as a parent, is it okay to say, I don't want her to continue in the gifted program?
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. As a
Okay.
parent, yes. I mean, that is it's an enrichment program. And I think they say, like, pull out for a year, and if you go back in after a year, you're good. But any further than that, you would have to go through the whole battery of
Well, and
tests.
what's interesting is math is her favorite subject. It's what she feels her strength is, and that's the one area where she's not being served. She's being served in all the other classes, but not the math.
And sometimes that's a numbers game too with,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
systems. They have to, so many kids are in this math class, okay, well, this is full.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and unfortunately that happens, you know, public education is just.
Okay.
And you
Thank
have to look at, and I think I may have told y'all the story. I'm not sure if I did or not, about one of my students years and years ago, and she was in 5th grade with me and was getting ready to go to middle school. And she and her parents and her mother was an educator in our system as well, and came to me and said she hated to read. She would rather be gouged in the eyeballs with forks. Now, beautiful reader, excellent, gifted in that area, hated it with every ounce of her life. And they knew that when she went to middle school, that rigor was just going to be ramped up even more. And so, you know, they had come to me and specifically said, we don't care what you do with the gifted, just don't put her in the gifted ELA classes, because, you know, so I did. That's what we recommended. And then when she got to middle school and they looked at her scores, they threw her in those classes. So we had to go back and go through the whole thing again. And it was kind of a butting of heads, because numerically, yeah, she looked like she should have been in those classes, but it wasn't what was best for her, because it was going to make her totally miserable and her parents totally miserable, and further turn her off of reading, which you don't want to happen to a child going into middle school. So yeah, she probably would have. And this is a child who's just recently, her parents said, oh, by the way, just to let you know, she's decided to take her LSAT, which is not what she majored in. She's 28 now. And I was like, okay, I could see that, because she could argue with anyone. But yeah, and we had to, you know, really come back with that. And we struggled with that. We had an IB program at Calhoun years ago. And when it was starting to kind of dwindle down, I mean, it was an excellent program. I don't know if any of y'all have IB or have had.
I graduated with it.
Okay, well, you know the rigor involved in it. Well, and so it had started kind of dwindling, and
I think it's gone now.
yeah, they were looking at cost feasibility. Is this something that we should continue? And my oldest nephew was in high school at the time, and he didn't want to do it. He could have done it. It wouldn't have been a problem. He said, I want to have a life too, because he also played every sport and everything else. And they tried to talk to him and tried to talk to his parents, and of course his mom and dad deferred to me. And then when he still wasn't in IB, they came out. You know, I was what was I doing at the time? I think I was a principal of an elementary school at the time. And then they started calling me from the high school, going, he really needs to be in these classes. But it's, you know, it's individual child. It was, you know. And that's what he said. He said, I want to do other things. And I've had friends that have done that
that's all they could do was IB. So, you know, it depends on the individual child. There's a lot more to take into account than just these numbers that we see.
And I will tell you, we do have quite a few gifted kids that come in, and even in resource, we're having struggled getting them motivated somewhere. And sometimes they just need what I call a kick in the butt with a wet boot, and just a reality check, and just go, look, man, you're in charge of your learning. You're in charge of making that brain grow. I said, my job is to hurt your brain. I think I do a pretty good job at that, but you've got to make that brain grow. And so some of them we just have a really hard time. So looking at all those areas, we try to find, even if it's just that one little makey. If it's a makey kit, that'll get them fired up about it. We can get them fired up about something. Okay, go program something now, and then you turn them loose. My little one of my little twice exceptional kids, we were doing something last year where they were having to design a pamphlet. We were getting ready for our health fair. It was our culminating activity, learning all about the human body. We did this huge extensive unit with the human body. We covered every system except one. I guess you can guess which one that is. I wasn't going to touch that one. So I was like, parents, you're on your own with that one. But we covered everything else. But at the end, our culminating activity, they had to design a pamphlet, and they had to put together a presentation about something they learned, whatever they wanted. I left it wide open for them. Well, one of my little twice exceptional, he knew how to make the pamphlet. It was a blank thing. I had a teacher say, well, why don't you just send them that pre-formed pamphlet? And I was like, well, why would I do that? Then they learned absolutely nothing from that. So no, they've got to learn how to manipulate those text boxes and margins and all that kind of stuff to get it to fold right. Well, he became the hero, and everybody was going to him, show me how to do that. How did you do that? So you want to talk about a kid's self-esteem that just exploded over making a pamphlet for the health fair. And he still talks about that. He was like, Mr. Carver, do you remember? And I was like, yes, buddy, I remember. I call him my wet noodle because every time I hug him, he like turns limp. So anyway, but yeah, it builds him up a little bit. Any other questions? I think I've talked long enough. I know. I could talk about gifted all day, every day. That's what I do, all day, every day.
What is the Torrance test out of 100, or how high is that? What's high on that?
The Torrance is.
That's the creativity one, right?
Yes,
Okay.
it is. No, there's like there's a scale over here for 100, and a scale over here for 20, and then you merge these scales, and it's crazy. It's not out of 100. I mean, you can get it normed, and then you get a norm rating, but as far as the scoring, it's not like we're doing like 10 points for this and 4 points, and then add that up to get 100. But it does have it out of like
My
it'll
son,
norm
he took it. I didn't know he qualified for gifted this year.
through Torrance.
Through
3 years. Yeah.
He almost qualified for it, but he chose to do it.
Now the Torrance, I love watching kids do that, but it's just what they come up with. But it's hard to score. It takes for one Torrance, it takes anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes to score for one. Don't you think? I mean, we got pretty fast with it, but somebody can score really quick. But if they do a lot of drawings, it takes a while. Anything else you want me to cover?
I think that's it. Any other questions for Angie?
Do you want these